Hey everybody, and welcome to this fall storm webinar all about the physics. This is Physics 101, and we've got a lot of great information to share with you today. So we've aligned a all-star storm-studded cast for you here at the test facility at Storm Headquarters in Brigham City, Utah. We've got Steve Klimkin. He's our VP of Marketing and a USBC Hall of Famer. We've also got Zach Trevino, who's our technical developer, as well as a pro shop operator extraordinaire. We've also got Hank Boomershine, who's coming in a little bit later to explore more details about the atomic core. He's our VP of R&D, as well as a USBC Gold Level Certified Coach. And I am Chad McLean, Storm Bowling's Tech Director and compensated t-shirt model for stormbowling.com. So today, we've got a lot of great info, like I said, to share with you. More on the atomic core that's in the all-new Physix, this year's big premier line, top drawer asymmetrical ball that we have coming out. One of the biggest questions we've gotten so far is, what does the Physix do compared to the Codex? So not only are we going to answer that question, we're going to do it in true storm fashion with a stroker, tweener, cranker comparison across 3 different layouts. So we drilled a lot of balls for this test. It's going to be, we got a lot of great ball motion videos to share with you. Also, we got some new products coming out, some new cleaners and everything that we're excited. You might have heard of the Hyrode X. Got a little bit more info to share on that as well. And also the big question that's been on everyone's mind are these new USB-C rules. So we've did a pretty neat CG static weight placement test based on the manufactured CG of what comes off of a Physix and how they tie into the new USB-C rules and how that affects you. So let's get right into it. Steve?
All right. Well, thanks, Chad. Well, let's talk physics here. This is really the highlight, big premier line ball for us. A lot of new technology in this bowling ball. So let's get right to it. So NRG hybrid reactive cover stock. This is the first time that we've used this blend on a catalog bowling ball in a U.S. domestic release. This is a very aggressive, strong cover stock. Being a hybrid blend, though, it doesn't give us too much of one or the other. It's a very nice blend of both. 3,000 grit Aberlon prep surface. So again, it's kind of in that middle of the road. It can be adjusted either way very easily. But the big new feature of this bowling ball, of the new Physix, is the atomic core. So we pre-recorded a video with Hank Boomershine, and he's actually going to take us through and talk a little bit about the design of this atomic core. Let's take a look.
Storm Nation fans, Hank Boomershine here. Talk a little bit about what's going on today with the atomic weight lock. And this atomic core, we took a little bit of things we've done in the past, and we've had some great successes with making low RG, high differential, asymmetrical parts. And so over the course of those years, we've learned what makes them spin up faster, what makes them create the most amount of shape in the mid lane. And a lot of times we've done many different things over the years of creating the higher densities, creating flip blocks, creating those slugs and things in places. And we learned from those processes that we can do many different things. And what we did in this one is we create a very strong center mass from the x-axis. If you look, we create down that center point from the x-axis off the pin, we create a very heavy mass. So that makes us a low RG, so it gets us to spin up faster. And then the other thing we've used over the years, we've used ellipses in a couple different cores. And what we did, we used the ellipses at these 45-degree angles. And those, what they do is they create like a helical arc effect. And so when you let go of the ball and it travels down the lane, it's trying to right itself and spin, it spins kind of like a corkscrew, and what we call a helical arc. And as it's doing this, you have one opposing force coming to the top and the other opposing force going to the bottom, so it creates a torque effect, okay? And then the very large oval bolt in the center, and some people might say it's cosmetic, but many times no, it's not. It actually, there's a very vital part of that. And that very large ellipses across the middle creates a very distinct preferred spin axis in that Y. And so now when we tilt that mass back and forth and we're moving it left to right, closer to or farther away from the vertical axis line, we can really control the shape. So by doing those and using those pieces and parts, many of those that have a little bit have been used in the past to help create certain designs, we've created something that's one of the strongest asymmetrical pieces in the marketplace. And then the added slug to the bottom, once again, enhances that torque effect. So when you create that helical arc as it travels down the lane, and you got the slug enhanced in that as well too, as the slug comes up to the top, it creates that torque effect as well too. So lots of technology going into this atomic core to create what we feel is one of the most diverse, strongest asymmetrical balls to date. So those of you who have any other questions and want to know a little bit more of the ins and outs, you can definitely reach out to us here at Storm Products, myself, Chad McLean, Zach Trevino, even Kendall Miles. We'll all be here to answer questions for you. And those Storm Nation fans out there, if you want some more, and go into your VIP Pro shops and reach out to them as well too. And so once again, we appreciate everything you do, and bowl up a storm.
All right, well, Hank, thanks for joining us. Now, there's a term I guess and very few people have ever heard before in the bowling industry, the helical arc. So why don't you talk just a little bit more about that, but then also let's talk a little bit about the RG and differential numbers in the 14s, 15s, and 16s.
Sure. All right, hey, thanks once again for joining us. The helical arc, something very unique, because anytime a ball travels down the lane, we know we create that tilt of the core, and so the tilt of the core, it's offset, and as it's rotating, you got one axis coming up and the other axis turning, so it creates like a helical arc. You think of like a corkscrew effect. That's really what a helical arc's all about. And in this part, the atomic core, you're looking at 15-pounders at 248, and you got a differential of 248.
Fast revving.
Quick revving. We create that heavy center mass from the pin down through the slug at the bottom, and then still 53 differential and a 17 intermediate. So yeah, we create a lot of torque effect on that one. But even in the 14s and in the 16s, we still have some low RG in there. And then you look at a 14, 253, still 52 differential. So we know the RG goes up because the part gets lighter, but we're still trying to max out the amount of differential so we can create the most amount of flare in those lighter weight parts. And still a 15 intermediate split still gives us a strong enough preferred spin axis so that it does want to define itself traveling down the lane. And then the 16-pounder, 248, 054 for the big guys like you throwing those 16-pound heavyweight, the man weight balls. Yeah.
Not rev rate, but ball weight.
Man weight. Norm Duke will always tell you man weight. So 54 diff. So we're starting to creep up to the high end of that differential scale. So a lot of flare. Still the 17 intermediate. So it still gives us that tremendous amount of strong preferred spin axis, the defined shot shape and motion. So if we want to dial in pin buffers and distances and PSAs, it does give us some really good fine-tuning effects. So.
All right, Hank, well, thanks a lot. Some awesome info. And next up, we're going to pass it back to Chad McLean. We're going to talk a little bit about the Doppler test report. This is a very technical, detailed piece of information that really helps us understand the differences in ball motion between two different high-performance bowling balls. Chad?
So the Doppler test is an early stage test that we perform here at Storm when we really want to find out the nitty-gritty of a bowling ball and to find out what it does against a ball that we already know like the back of our hand. So for this test, we did the Sherlock versus the Physix. And we did this because the Sherlock is nano-based material as well as the Physix, but it's a different prep, it's solid, Physix is hybrid, so it was a great comparison to really see what this ball does early on. So for this test, I was the tester. I am a cranker by nature. I have a rev rate of about 480. My tilt is pretty low at 6 degrees, and my axis rotation is 45 degrees. So what this Doppler test does for us is not only put a side-to-side ball motion path that's provided by Specto, but it also gives us the tech data so we can see how these balls stack up against each other on paper. So overall, this Physix versus Sherlock test, we already knew that this was going to happen. The mid lane was a little bit less, -1%, but the back end and entry angle on the Physix was a little bit grayer just because it is 3000 grit and it's a hybrid cover stock. So it's a little bit cleaner through the front, a little bit more angle, but it really gets interesting against the Codex later on in our stroker versus tweener versus cranker test. So the test pattern that we used for this test and all the tests that you're going to see today was the 4-to-1, 41-foot Kegel's beaten path. So this really gives us good representation of what our customers see out there with pretty good amount of friction up front, and it's not too long, it's not too short, it's right middle of the road at 41 feet.
All right, Chad, thank you much. Now we're going to go into a little bit more detail here and talk about the pin buffer layout system. This is a system that was developed here at Storm many years ago, and it details exactly how you can lay out a bowling ball with the reference point being the pin, the PSA, and the distance of the pin to the bowler's vertical axis line. There's 3 distinct numbers. One of our main layouts that we use is the 4x4x2 layout, and that's one of the balls, or one of the layouts, I should say, that we're going to be using in our test demonstration that's becoming in the next section. Now, we recently published 3 terrific videos with Alex Hoskins. If you want to go to YouTube, you can check out our Storm Bowling Balls page. There are 3 great videos. It goes through and tremendous detail and shows some animation that's really never before been seen in our sport that gives you information on what happens if I change that first number, what happens if I change that second number, or the third number, whether it's a pin above or pin below the fingers, and how that affects ball motion. They are absolutely outstanding. I guarantee you it's worth your time. All right, so next up, we're going to go to Zach, and he's going to take us through our stroker, tweener, cranker test that's going to go through and show the difference between the Physix with 3 distinct different styles and compare it with one of our other premier line bowling balls. Zach?
Thanks, guys. So here in the internal testing section of our webinar, we're going to take a look here at the Physix versus the Codex. Now, these are both going to be lined up with 3 identical layouts for 3 different players, different styles, but we're all going to line them up based on strike lines. We're really just going to see the difference in motion, entry angle, and how they stack up against each other. However, each player is going to use the exact same layouts, and they're common layouts that we recommend via our VLS system. All right, so now we're going to take a look at our testers. We used a stroker, a tweener, and a traditional cranker for these internal tests. First, we have Su-Ling Utley, who is our straighter player, our stroker. Lindsay Boomershine is the tweener. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with her. And then Chad McLean is our cranker with all of the revs and muscles and tight shirts. So first, let's take a look here at Su-Ling. We're going to feature her in this profile here. So 16 miles an hour of ball speed, 230 RPMs. Pretty good amount of tilt at 15 degrees and 60 degrees of axis rotation. So she's going to represent a lot of what you're going to see with the majority of customers that you have that come into the shop. The player that likes to go up the lane, that likes to stay right, play in the track area, or even a little bit farther right. So this was important that we feature a player of this style in our testing. All right, so let's take a look at Su-Ling's specs. So her PAP is 4 5/8 over by 1 inch up. The layouts that we use, and again, these are the layouts that we're going to use for everybody. The layouts we use are the 3 by 5 by 1, the 4-4-2, very popular, strong, high flaring layout there, and then the 5 by 3 by 4. This is, for most players, going to be that strong pin down layout. All right, so taking a look here at the actual photos of the bowling balls, you see the layouts, you see the pin placements, PSA locations, and notice that over on the 5-3-4, the ball's on the right, the pin is not visible, and that's because it's drilled in Su-Ling's middle finger, and this is okay. Doesn't void any kind of warranty. We actually prefer that if you've got a layout that locates the pin within 1 inch of those fingers, to go ahead and just drill it out anyways. So let's take a look at the tests. All right, so first we're going to go ahead and take a look here at the 5-3-4. Again, this is... For Su-Ling, this actually was the quote-unquote weakest layout for these balls of the tests that we did. So we saw Codex there. Let's see how Physix compares and lines up. You get a good profile of her game. And you can see there that Physix was a little parallel left. Increased launch angle. I just had to feed it out a little bit more belly. And looking at the results, we saw more entry angle. It actually got a little farther right. Again, just had to make that slight adjustment and open up those angles a little bit. It was higher up on the head pin, just faced up a lot stronger. All right, so now taking a look at the second layout, and these are going to progress from right to left for the players, and so this is actually the 3 by 5 by 1. So shorter pin to PAP distance. This ball gets into a roll nice and early, really controls the amount of down lane motion for Su-Ling. Still doesn't force her outside of a comfort zone. We saw Codex there, so let's take a look at how Physix stacked up. And similar result to the first layout. You see that was really high flush in the pocket, taking out the 7 late. So looking at the specs here, again, finished a little bit higher in the head pin, actually picked up a little sooner. Now we're moving into the oil. Obviously, you get closer to the body of the pattern, and the cover, that NRG hybrid on Physix really picked up a little bit sooner. So we saw a foot less in skid, still got farther right and resulted in more entry angle. All right, now let's take a look at the 4-4-2. This, again, is a very popular layout that we recommend for a lot of folks, especially straighter players, to handle those high-volume house shots as you kind of move their left to second arrow. So we saw the Codex there. This is a very high-flaring layout, once more, with a strong PSA placement as well. Physix really highlighted that. You can see that now she's between second and third arrow. Again, not playing a ton of launch angle. It's not like she has to throw it out to the gutter, but that ball is going to feed off more oil. These stronger layouts are really going to benefit from that. So taking a look here at the numbers, again, a foot sooner in breakpoint distance for Physix, thanks to that stronger cover. And it resulted in more entry angle as well. They were launched very, very similarly, within half a board actually down lane. So launch angle were very similar there, but Physix did face up stronger.
All right, well, 3 distinct layouts, and I'm seeing a difference in ball motion based off of those 3 different layouts, but it keeps her within that same little maybe comfort zone between that second and third arrow, which is where a lot of the strokers like to play. What did you see, Chad?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note that everyone should pay attention to the progression of the layouts that are used in these tests, because for each of the stroker, tweener, cranker, they're going to progress differently. No one throws it the same, especially these 3 testers. So with that being said, keep in mind her progression, her furthest right was the 5-inch pin to pat, the next one was the 3-inch, and then lastly the 4. But why is that, Hank?
Well, the biggest thing we always see is that speed and rotation and tilt always kind of dictate players' favorite layouts. And many times a player that wants to stay farther right, you know, a player like you and a high rev player might see a different type of layout that they use from farther left, but a stroker or somebody with a little less rotation or higher speed might stay farther to the right. So you're going to see a big difference between these 3 players, and Chad at the end will talk a little bit more about that.
All right, so now on to our tweener. As I mentioned before, this is Lindsay Boomershine. You're going to see a little bit more ball speed when compared to Su Ling, so 17 miles an hour off her hand. Rev rate is over 100 more, so 335 RPM, a little less tilt at 10 degrees, and just a touch less axis rotation at 55. So we can see here the bowling balls we use for Lindsay. Again, identical layouts, but based off her difference in PAP, you're going to see the pin in different locations. So her PAP is 5 1/4 over by 7/16 up. All right, so first we're going to take a look at what ball gave her the straightest look. And notice that it's a little bit different than what we had for Su Ling. So this is actually the 3x5x1. You can see that Lindsay is a little bit cleaner at the bottom. The ball gets out onto the lane really, really well. It's a very clean transition. So getting into that tweener stage, shorter pins and shorter pin buffers result in that ball using a little bit of energy early and controlling that down lane motion. Let's take a look at Physix here. All right, so that's a really good shot there. You can see the ball just absolutely split the 8-9. That's a very good demonstration of the difference in these balls. And similar with what we saw with Su Ling, a little bit earlier breakpoint distance. The ball was launched a little bit steeper, and these are all strike lines, really to highlight the best line for that ball. So the ball got farther, Physix, I should say, got farther right and faced up even stronger in the pocket. All right, so second, we're going to take a look here at the 5-3-4. So this is the strong pin down layout for Lindsay. You can see forced her a little bit farther left with that codex there. You're looking at just a touch left a second arrow now. When compared to Physix, we're going to see a continued trend here. Even now with a longer pin buffer layout, that shell still loves the oil. It's going to handle those volumes very, very well. And again, that's NRG hybrid that we've got on Physix. Taking a look at the specs here, similar results, right? So a little bit steeper launch. It's still faced up stronger. And for those customers that are in this zone, this pretty much is the track area. You're looking at just a little bit left of second arrow. This is a part of the lane that's going to be heavily used by the majority of your league bowlers. And you can see that Physix really, really shines there. All right, now finally, again, similarly to Su Ling, the strongest layout for Lindsay was the 4x4x2. Lots of flare. We've talked about this before. This layout is quite popular. You can see this forces her a little bit farther in. And notice how Codex, because of R2S solid, doesn't quite have that footprint in the oil, doesn't quite have the teeth. And even though it's still shaped nicely down lane, didn't quite pick up soon enough now that she's in closer to 15, closer to that third arrow where the volume of the pattern really starts to build. Let's see what Physix does in comparison. All right, so much better shot there, much more shape. It was a little bit more rounded. You could see that it just picked up, a lot earlier, and that's what you want. Is you're moving in these strong layouts, these strong covers. If you got the players that are going to bump left of the track, are going to play inside of it, that's where this ball is really, really going to shine for a tweener. Strokers can still play a little bit farther right, maybe in the track, but as you increase those rev rates, it's important that you have a ball that really feeds in the oil. So taking a look at specs, again. Ball faced up a lot better. And as you moved inside, it just never quit. You never saw it miss the spot. That's a good thing.
Looking at these videos from Lindsay, I can see that the 4x4x2 is the most aggressive, just like Su Ling. So I think that also kind of lends a little credence to why we have that as our #1 layout in our layout system.
Yeah, with her little bit lower rev rate, she matched up closer towards Su Ling than she did myself, which we'll see in a minute. But as for all 3 balls, all of them progressed just the same way. you know, the physics compared to the Codex, but the physics just a little bit deeper just because it's that much stronger.
Yeah, the biggest thing we saw was that Lindsay started with a 3.51 first because the higher flaring ball, trying to have that shorter transition based off her speed, she's still, you know, that speed to rev rate, she matches up pretty well. But if you notice in Su Ling, she used it the opposite direction. So she used the 5 first, and then she went to the 3x5. So we're just showing that the differences in the players, those speeds and rotations, will definitely dictate kind of where they like to use them in the lane. And then we'll see a drastic difference when we see Chad here in a minute.
All right, so last but not least, we're going to take a look here at the cranker that we use for our testing. This was going to be Chad McLean. So 18 miles an hour of ball speed, 490 to 500 RPMs, 6 degrees of tilt, and less axis rotation right at 45 degrees. So taking a look at Chad's specs, his PAP is 5 inches over, 0 up or down, and we can see the balls that we used here for the tests. And again, similar actually to Su Ling, on that 5.34, you don't see the pin. And Chad doesn't use grips, but that pin is actually right in his ring finger. Again, totally okay to do that. Make sure you drill out as much of it as you can. All right, so first we're going to take a look here at the Codex for Chad. It's drilled 3x5x1. So with the shorter pin to PAP distance, this allows him to control the back end part of the lane a little bit better. This is a ball, you know, probably he's going to go to a little bit earlier when you're trying to keep those angles straighter. Let's see how Physix compares and really see what the difference is with his rev rate. All right, so it's a good shot there by Chad, and you can see that it really got the 10 out nicely, kicked it out well. And the difference because Chad's rev rate's higher, you're going to see a little bit more dispersion amongst the two lines. And this is important to note for your higher rev players, maybe your two-handed or your no-thumb bowlers, that, you know, the difference here between balls and shells and weight blocks, that's going to be magnified because that ball is just creating so much more energy because it's revving faster. So taking a look at the specs here, the ball, again, Physix was launched steeper, got over a board farther right down lane, picked up 2 feet sooner. Chad's crossing more boards here, so that ball's it's starting in the oil already, whereas some of your straighter players aren't crossing those boards early on. But even still, faced up really, really nicely, and it just creates a lot of angle down lane. You can see the difference in ball paths. All right, so interestingly enough, the second strongest layout for Chad in this test here was the 4x4x2. And I'm not really gonna, not gonna spoil it for you guys. The panel's gonna talk about it a little bit later. But taking a look here, you can see that with Codex, that had nice shape, forced him a little bit farther left. Still right of 20, but definitely more launch angle. He's really getting it right, really feeding it out there to the friction. And with Physix, it was even more so. So big difference there. You can see just in set down and launch, that's almost a full arrow farther left, and that's a very high flaring layout, very strong motion in general. But because of his rev rate, those differences are really going to be amped up. So taking a look at the specs here, now keep in mind because it's so far left. We're not talking a board or two. I mean, this was a big difference in launch. Physix actually went a little bit longer with this test. There's so much more oil in that middle part of the lane, but it had no issue recovering. So for your higher rev players, those that generate a little, and especially with higher speed, because Chad does launch it faster, the ball still didn't miss it. Right? It's getting to the spot really well. Didn't quite get as far right down lane just because this is the strike line. This is optimal for what he was feeling on beaten path, but the ball didn't miss it at all. Still recovered really well, even though it skidded quite a bit. All right, so finally, we're going to take a look at the strongest layout here, and this was kind of eye-opening, even for us internally. We don't quite have the rev rate that Chad does, and we were surprised to see that the 5.34 was actually the ball that forced him the farthest left to play the most angle. So here's a shot of Codex. You can see creeping pretty much almost just right at 20 at the arrows, still launched pretty far right down lane. But what you're going to see with Physix here was really, really eye-opening. This is an excellent shot. This shot really depicts what this ball is all about. Even with this layout, again, for somebody with his specs, forces him quite a bit left, but these were launched. This ball was launched so steep, they almost got to the exact same spot down lane. but there was so much more launch angle and more entry angle. That shot with Physix was really, really impressive. You can see it just recovered. The ball had a blinker, but they were launched so differently that Physix has so much angle to overcome, and it just never quit. That was absolutely excellent. You know, thanks to that atomic core combined with NRG hybrid. This deep inside line, you're going to see this from your two-handers, your no-thumbers. I mean, that was really impressive. That the ball really played. I mean, it had that much shape and still just absolutely pounded the pocket.
Well, I really love the way that Physix went through the pins on that last shot, Chad. That was awesome to see. But the one thing I'm really noticing between watching the 3 different styles of players, look at that 5-inch pin ball. It was the most aggressive for you with your higher rev rate. Actually, for Su Ling, being the stroker, it was the one that she would play most to the outside with, and then Lindsay, it fell right in the middle. So it really proved to me how important it is to know your customer and know your customer's style when you're trying to choose the right layout.
Yeah, Steve. So this was kind of a nice test because they progressed for me exactly how you would expect them to. 3, 4, 5. When I'm going to a pattern that I know is a little bit heavier, a little bit flatter, fresh, I always gravitate towards the layout that has the 3, 5, 1. So it's a benchmark layout for me. So we all have our benchmark balls. This is my benchmark layout. It gives me the best look where I can keep my angles more in front of me, a little bit more square. It gives me a truer, smoother read. So I really know what is happening out there on the lanes. And then going
fresher patterns too, right? Like when the lane's a little fresher.
Fresher, flatter, you name it. That's my sort of layout. So going in from there, the next ball I progressed to was the 4x4x2. It was still very controllable, very smooth reading for me with the 4-inch pin to pap and the 4-inch PSA distance for that matter. So it was just a little bit inside of the 3x5x1, but still gave me the type of look that I would go to and progress to in a block. And lastly, the 5-inch by 3x4 layout was my most aggressive. Well, it required me to get the steepest launch angle because the longer pin to pap distance really retained a lot of energy for me and forced me to cross a lot of boards laterally because of that longer pin to pap distance. But really figuring out what's happening inside, I'm going to let Hank tell me more because I want to learn something myself.
Well, thanks, guys. Biggest thing to always remember is, layouts are always really based around the player. Speeds, rotations, rev rates. And we noticed, Chad, the 5x3x4 was the strongest one for you. And the biggest thing is if you try to play right with a 5x3x4, it's going to have so much energy coming off the back of the pattern that it becomes very...
It's a problem I had for historically.
Absolutely. And a lot of times we think that we need to use a pin down layout, a little bit farther buffer on the fresh, but unfortunately what happens is it has too much energy in a pattern. So if you do move left, it goes too far. If you move right, it hooks too much. So the 3x5x1 uses energy a lot quicker. The transition zone, that 1-inch pin buffer, does it faster so that it lines up quicker so that you're staying on more direct, like you said you like to do. But you got a player like Lindsay or a player like Su Ling might have it a little bit different so that they don't have enough rev rate to get that ball to flare up enough. So they might use it in a different spot, and we saw it in their videos. So in the end, that 5x3x4 ends up being your strongest ball because it never loses enough energy in the front part of the lane. And as the lane starts to break down, those are balls you always go to because you need to have more angle down lane as a rev player because you have to chase the wheel left. So, I mean, these videos were great in showing us that there's so much difference between styles, but yet these layouts can work for pretty much any style. They just might work in different parts of the lane. And so the Physix really shined in this moment. And Zach pointed out to us, all of us, that, hey, a little bit left, it goes a little bit farther right. But the thing we noticed is it had a more entry angle down lane throughout all this testing. So it held true based on what we thought, and our internal testing showed it that, Physix and this atomic core is going to be a big ball for us in the line, and it's going to definitely give you, the pro shop operators, some definite versatility with your customers to create the layouts that fit best for them. And once again, that fit best to their eye, because we might think one thing, but in the end of the day, the bowler likes to see a certain type of shape or certain type of motion. So now pro shops, you have a better idea how to dial it in for them. Wow, 10 years, it's been amazing. High Road's been out that long, and to see all those wins, and it just, you just can't imagine that a ball could last that long in the marketplace these days. And folks, it's not going away, and there's a nice new little addition to this Thunder line that's coming in here, and let's take a little look at Steve throwing it down the lane.
I'm using that one just for the
that High Road X, I tell you what, that was an awesome ball. I mean, you could see on that video I was playing multiple different angles, different releases, able to really manipulate my hand, change the roll, and adjust the break point. And you know, the one thing with this R2X solid polished cover stock we have on the High Road, this is a combination we haven't had before with this weight block. But the one commonality between that and the original High Road is the fact that it really eases through the front. There was absolutely it just really felt like it was floating and gliding no matter where I was playing. But very strong and responsive off the break point, which is what so many people love with the original High Road. And you're going to get that with the High Road X as well. All right, guys, so we give you a lot of great information on the Physix as well as the High Road X, but there's also two new products here that we want to discuss. We're going to show you a couple videos here on True Blue and uClean uScore. True Blue is our all-natural cleaner. Safe, non-toxic root vegetables are used throughout this formulation. We have a video on that. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the uClean uScore. We have a new and improved formula, and the original uClean uScore is a product that started this company. So it's, you know, there's a real tribute to the history here you're going to see from Bill and Barbara Chrisman.
The way we got started was a friend of mine who worked at Faball, Utah, came up to me and we started talking about cleaners, because in the 80s, urethane balls, everybody was cleaning them, put them in a dishwasher or put them in their sink and washing them with dishwashing detergent and to keep the reaction better. So I said, well, I can make one that you can clean, put on a towel and clean on lane. I went ahead and ordered the bottles, printed and everything, but you know, I went ahead and I made a box and printed the bottles and a leap of faith and went forward and call everybody on the phone, make samples, send them to them. And we were pretty successful. I mean, we didn't sell that much, but I made a little bit of money. That particular piece says consistent, repeatable performance. And that was clean your urethane bowling ball. That's uClean uScore's first poster. We sent that to different pro shops. And the theory is, if you clean your bowling ball, you get consistent, repeatable performance by cleaning your bowling ball.
Hi, my name is Dr. Truott. I have a PhD in the field of nutrition. Actually, I formulate a lot of nutritional products as my forte. As a young man, 24 years old, I actually bought my first 20-lane bowling center. I owned a bowling center at 24 years of age. I've just been always involved in bowling. As I saw what I had with this polyphenolic natural substance, I had this crazy idea, well, let's see what it will do on my personal bowling equipment. For me personally, I used it as my ball cleaner and I loved it. Plus it was, if you happen to spray it and get in some eye or whatever, it's totally natural, it's not going to hurt you at all that way. And so I gave Mr. Chrisman a call and I said, let me show this to you. They liked the idea, liked the concept. It's under the label True Blue Cleaner.
Zach, it's good to have you back, and hopefully you enjoyed those two cleaners videos on the uClean uScore and True Blue. And now Hank's going to take us through our next section, which is going to talk about the differences in performance based off of the CG to pin distance. Hank, we should let him know what we saw here.
All right, bowlers, let's take a little look here. So we did a couple of tests here, and the biggest thing that we're noticing, and the USBC's made this rule change. So now we're opening the static rule to a 3-ounce maximum in any direction. So there's been a lot of questions. So hey, if I have a pin placement of said distance with a mass bias placement of different distance, and one has a different CG placement than the other, hey, what's this really going to affect in ball motion? Because, you know, there's a lot of questions out there because we can't have the extra hole to kind of balance them out and put them in the places that we felt in the past always kind of dialed in our ball motion. So what we notice is we have one that's a 3-inch pin to the 3-inch pin to the CG, and then another one that is a pin 6 inches to the CG. So we basically created a 5x3x2 layout, and we're going to target, we're going to try to match the laydowns, launch angles, and the release speed on these two balls to see if anything kind of defines itself in differences in reaction between the two. So really we're going to see if we can quantify any differences in these two balls. So the first video we're going to show here is we're going to show this is a 5x3x2. This was the 3-inch CG to pin. Notice it's a little bit stronger, more positive weight in it. We'll talk a little bit about those statics and the final measurements in the end. But let's take a look at that one first. And if we notice in this first video, we still see a great motion in the ball, great shot shape, gets to the pocket. But what do we know difference between the 6-inch pin and the 3-inch pin to the CG? So let's take a look at the other video. So now we have the other video here. Chad's trying to mimic the exact same laydown point and launch angle and speed at release. So if we notice the two, you really don't see any differences in the shot shape. So based on initial read on video, you'd say to yourself, well, I don't really see much. So let's take a look at the numbers. So we have pre and post drill specs, 24805.317. We know that's the standard spec. After drilling, we add a little bit of differential to it. The intermediate goes up a little bit because anytime we get the hole closer to the PSA, we make the weight block a little bit narrower. We increase the intermediates. But if we look at the static weights in the ball, positive side, 1.8 ounces of static side weight, finger weight, 1.2 ounces of finger weight. So if we look at the other ball, in the ball that's 6-inch CG to the pin, we look at 24805.317 prior to drilling, after drilling, almost identical specs. We haven't changed the specs any because we're still putting the holes in the same place into the weight block. So even though the static is in a different spot because that's a little bit of a floating static mass, we're still placing it based on the pin distances and the PSA distances, we're still placing the holes in the same spot. But we do notice a difference in a positive weight. So only a little over half an ounce of side weight, still about 1.1 ounces of thumb weight versus 1.2 ounces of finger. So we flip that finger and thumb weight between the two balls. So you'd say in statics, we do see a distinct difference, almost an ounce more, a little over an ounce more of positive side, but in reference, 2 ounces difference, 1 ounce of finger weight to 1 ounce of thumb weight. So 2 total ounces difference in weight. Okay, so let's take a look at Specto here. And then we show those shot pass, and we've seen these shot pass throughout this entire webinar in those internal testing that we did. Now, notice that there was 2 shots made with each ball. So now we have 2 shots with each ball. So there's 4 balls on this shot path, and virtually you can only see 1 ball path and 1 ball motion. And what it goes to prove to you is in a strong asymmetrical bowling ball that really the most important thing to remember is pin distances to the PAP, PSA distances to the PAP and the buffer. No matter where the CG falls, the reactions are going to be pretty much identical. The only thing you might see a little difference is in pins, but we haven't done thorough enough testing, no one has, to see if there's a difference in the static weight as they go through the pins. But in our ball motion, for that traveling through the lane, virtually no differences in shot shape. So bowlers, pro shop operators, don't be afraid. If you've got one with a little bit higher, a little shorter CG, one with a little bit farther CG, just put the layout in you want based on that pin and PSA. And once again, it's the most important factor. So I guess there's a guy in the industry, he said something about CG no matter, so sometimes he is right. So in this situation, the CG really doesn't matter. It's pin distances to the and the PSA distances to the PAP.
All right, thank you so much for your time and attention. If you've watched this video before Friday, October 12th, know that we are going to have a live Q&A here, so it gives you time to watch this, maybe formulate some questions you might have, jot them down, and then you can ask them to us live on Friday, October 12th. So from all of us here, Hank, Zach, Chad, and Steve, myself, thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed it, and congratulations on passing Physics 101.